either we are there or not, ITSPmagazine still gets the best stories. There are plenty of conferences and all sorts of events that spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, we sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco.
Sean.
Sometimes, not only do I feel underappreciated, I feel misunderstood.
God, that's a great way to start a podcast. I don't know what to say.
Very positive.
There's artificial intelligence for that.
I know, just fix it with some AI.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you're doing that you don't like, get artificial intelligence to do it for you. So you can go play golf, do other things, or you can keep working, but do the things that you are supposed to be doing. And there you go, problem solved.
Problem solved. And we're joking a little bit, but there's a lot of truth to that. So I think we're getting closer by the minute where technology can help different roles in their job do good things. And today we're going to be looking at the role of the SOC analyst and their managers and kind of the whole operations in a security operations center. And as part of that, kind of a view into some of the challenges they face these days. Things have evolved over the years, what we look for and how we look at it, and the things we try to identify in our data sets have all expanded, including the data sets themselves. And I presume that makes things even more difficult. I'm not sitting in a SOC, so I don't know. But thankfully, we have somebody that has done a lot of research on this, talks to a lot of people who are in the SOC, and is going to give us some insights into what some of the challenges are today. So Chaz Lever, thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, super excited. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'm the Senior Director of Security Research for the CySec team at Devo. And so for those that are wondering, like, what is Devo and how does that make me at all qualified to be here? The Devo is a cloud-native logging and security analytics platform that delivers real-time visibility for security and operations teams. So basically, this gives you a quick and easy way to quickly ingest, analyze all of your data kind of at scale without needing to spin up on-premise infrastructure. So it makes it easy to kind of get started with this idea of what you're going to do in the SOC. And then prior to joining Devo, I kind of spent the last decade performing security research at Georgia Tech, and did some work with some other security startups during that time where I did consulting or, work to kind of help them build out their security research programs. And that's where I received my PhD before I joined there as research faculty for a little bit. And the work I was doing there kind of sat at the intersection of networking, security, and data science, where I was building systems to analyze like petabyte scale data sets to kind of help derive security insights. And so now at Devo, I'm here kind of leading a research team that's focused on trying to help build that kind of next generation of the autonomous SOC is, I think, the vision that Devo kind of has for the future. And so that's my background, yeah.
It's great background because, we want to understand what are the modern day challenges in the SOC. And there is no better way to do that, to kind of look quickly at what the past was, right? We were joking at the beginning, Sean and I, with artificial intelligence, advanced technology and taking over, but we know that there is people sitting in the SOC, there's people thinking about what needs to be done, there's people on the other side making bad things happen, and so it's going to be always a battle. But how do you feel like, if you could summarize today's SOC, it's different from the one of 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, so I think if you kind of look back at the SOC and how things have evolved, at least in the security space in general, I think you'll notice that we kind of went from the number of things that the SOC was finding. It was kind of looking for the needle in a haystack. We're looking for the few and the far between kind of breaches that were in the data that we had. And now I think if you look at it, like, those early SOCs had limited access to data. The tooling they had was more limited, and we've kind of evolved that tooling, and we have a lot more data. So, we have a lot more devices, we have more data, there's more attack surfaces. So the amount of things that the SOC has to be aware of has grown immensely. And so, this kind of raises a lot of questions, for those kind of that modern SOC about, like, how do you go about collecting all this data? Where do you store the data? What do you do with it after you have it? How do you collect data from, like, IoT devices, from, bring your own laptops to, like, all these things. There's no more kind of like moat that you had around your network where, you had physically hardwired computers that never left the premises, and, you could physically secure everything there. Now everything's kind of mobile and moving around, with phones and everything. It's a lot kind of harder for the SOC to kind of deal with some of those challenges. And I think that's one of those, evolutionary changes that, like, more threats, you have threats that are kind of commodity solutions now, where it's like, for somebody to get into the game of using malware or other things, they don't even have to be an expert in writing it. They can just go purchase it off the shelf. So, like, you have a much expanded, kind of group of folks that can engage in, kind of cyber crime and other things like that you kind of have to protect against. And there's just a lot more that you have to be aware of as a SOC now. And I think one of the challenges there is that even despite all this stuff, this evolution, the number of skilled security practitioners probably, hasn't been able to keep up as much with the demands on that modern SOC.
And Chaz, might be a little known fact for some folks, but many moons ago, I helped to bring one of the first SIMs to market. And one of the biggest challenges at that time, I'm talking 15 plus years ago now, to date myself, was just the stack of technology to even get something to run in the SOC.
Yes.
The database and the LDAPs and the networking connections and the distributed databases and I mean, all this stuff was just a mess. And so just operating the systems that allow you to do your job was a huge problem, let alone doing the job. So maybe, I don't know if we can pick on both of those things for a moment, the operational aspects of running a SOC, and then maybe the team actually doing their job. Not just having the data, but actually having a UI and a good UX experience to do what they do. So let's focus on maybe the operational aspect of running a SOC first.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting kind of evolutions here is, like, you now have this you have cloud native platforms, right? Where, I think, the old school thing of having to, like, run everything on premise, you don't have to do that anymore. You can use, depending on what your security posture is and what you're comfortable, putting in a cloud environment, you can get started really quick. I mean, you can go to a cloud native platform that will let you ingest data there, where you're not on the hook for managing all that infrastructure and understanding how all the database and all the other components fit together. And when they break, you're also not on the hook for, trying to kind of fix those. And that's, as someone who came from Georgia Tech, where we had to run a lot of our own stuff on-prem, deploying all that infrastructure and maintaining it and then doing your job on top of it was like several full-time jobs, maintaining, as you said, the databases and the infrastructure that you had to use to collect the data, store the data, and then, like, in addition to that, keep up the instance that let you actually do useful things with the data. That was a lot. And so, one of the benefits that, you get in this kind of more modern environment is you can find solutions that, are cloud native. Devo is one of them. Allows you to do that in the cloud, but, like, that's a huge win. And the great thing there is now you just have to worry about, like, getting data into the platform, and you can let the platforms kind of help you with the rest of it. So it makes things definitely easier for you if you're trying to, like, kind of just get up and running. And then, like, I think with that, given the kind of the staffing shortages and things like that you might have, and finding enough people to run things, you can focus more of your resources on, like, actually having the folks that can actually do security operations within the SOC rather than having to just, have like kind of IT operations and as well as that to make all this stuff work. And that can't be, I think, underestimated enough.
Yeah. So recognizing that all that's changed, hello cloud, and APIs, I'll throw those in there to make the connections. I've had some of these conversations with some CISOs that just because you eliminate on-prem and move things to the cloud and you have access to data through APIs, doesn't mean your team is magically better and they can magically use that new system. Because it is new technology stack, new way of accessing data, perhaps bigger feeds of data, faster feeds of data that they don't know how to deal with, perhaps. So talk to me a little bit, sticking to the kind of the operational element still, how modern technologies you can't just shift your SOC team to the cloud either, right? You have to spend your money to move your on-prem stuff to the cloud, and your team also has to transition with it. So are there any challenges on that front from a management perspective?
So, yeah, I mean, I think, shifting folks to the cloud, there's like it is kind of a different, skill set in some ways than like somebody on-prem. In some ways, some of the tooling that, you're shifting to the cloud is similar stuff that you may have seen running it on-prem, but, it may have slightly different, kind of access and use patterns. But like, from the day-to-day SOC perspective, I guess this is really kind of the question of like, does your SIEM of choice or does your kind of platform of choice run also in the cloud, or do you have to switch to a new environment? Because this is one of those kind of things where like even moving from like SIEM to SIEM, you would have had those kind of same barriers even before we moved to the cloud. So I think some of that is kind of part and parcel of getting stuck in kind of a bespoke stack. But I think one of the things that is kind of helpful with dealing with more of the data that I think you're starting to see with more of like kind of the modern SIEMs and more modern platforms is more automation around helping you do things. So this is kind of like providing things like behavioral analytics and stuff like that on top of the platform that you have to kind of help remove some of the burden of having to have your own kind of SOC analysts and figure out how to do those things in this new environment. Like some of it just kind of comes out the box by default, and helps your SOC be a little bit more capable, doing things in a new environment. So like they're not having to learn everything from scratch. They're having to learn, maybe how to use the alerts and things here, but like you're getting more maybe functionality out of the box. And so I think that's one of the benefits is that, those automations, come out of the box. And because it's running in maybe, a cloud setting, you may get more frequent updates and more frequent features that can get pushed more quickly, from a testing perspective. Whereas, when you were running those on-prem things, you may have not wanted to upgrade for fear of breaking something. And so like you're running a version of, your software that didn't have the latest features because, your IT team hadn't gotten around to deploying it yet. I think that's a kind of a benefit here is you maybe get more of those automations that maybe helps you transition faster and move a little bit quicker. And so that might be a benefit that kind of helps ease some of that transition of like having to deal with a new system altogether.
So let's talk about that, because one element that sounds to me break sometimes, it's actually the human element in the SOC, burnouts, overworked, and maybe, all these changes coming up and not knowing what is going to be the next job. I mean, but there is so many people that want to do that job. Some don't know how to transition into that job. And as you mentioned before, there is still that incredible gap of people that we do need to run the job, even if the machine is making things easier. So is there like a different path that you see now to be ideal for people that want to come in the industry in that role compared with what it was years ago now with all this automation? I mean, how does somebody today that is a student say, you know what, I want to do that job, I want to do it well, this is how I can get to be really good at it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things there is so much tooling available to you from if you're a SOC analyst today that maybe wasn't around 10 or 15 years ago, that, you can really use to kind of help make you as a superpower, really, like to kind of make you more effective as a single individual, and kind of automate away a lot of the things that you're doing beyond just, relying on other, things that might be available in your SIM platform. And so, like, if you're looking at kind of like, these tools, it's like, if you're, working with like networking data, it's like, are you familiar with like the, common tools that help you kind of slice and dice that kind of network traffic in kind of efficient ways, So this is like understanding, like, I'm trying to do, surveys of the internet to kind of find my attack surface. Like, are you familiar with like tools like Census and Shodan for like searching the internet for these types of vulnerability, like searching for attack surfaces that are exposed online? Are you familiar with things like TCP dump and Wireshark for like actually doing, on the wire packet inspection? Are you familiar with like, proxy suites there? So I think kind of, if you're trying to get into these kind of roles today, understanding some of the tool sets that are available to you and really trying to kind of master those are a really good place to start. And there are a lot of these that are, publicly freely available. Like they're not paid tools. They're like very powerful tools that a lot of industry professionals have. And like, one of the cool ways to use these is, like, if you're really trying to get into the space, is that, with the commoditization of kind of gear and stuff, the modern home lab is a great place to kind of run your own SOC, right? Like you can run a SOC from home. I know I have like a small network at home where, I've got my own kind of monitoring and logging and things like that, where I can play with a lot of the things that you might, see if you're a SOC analyst. You can get, tools like Rumble. I think it's now Run Zero to do a scanning of your own network, and you can ingest all of this stuff into your own kind of like open source SIM at home and start figuring out what some of these kind of processes might look like. So I think there's a lot of stuff that you can kind of do, in your own environment to kind of get up to speed with, like, what does it look like to actually do kind of security analysis in your own kind of organization at a smaller scale, and kind of level those up as you start to, kind of have to deal with these same kind of things in a larger environment. But I think that's something that probably wasn't possible, that much longer ago. There just wasn't this much kind of free open source tooling and, access to some of this kind of hardware that you can get now to run like firewalls and things like that in a home environment that are more sophisticated, didn't really exist. And so I think that's something that's super cool. If you're trying to get into today, I would highly recommend kind of running your own home lab and doing things with that.
And at some point, I presume we'll touch on scale, but I want to stick with this small environment first, because we're talking about the analysts doing their job. Either they're fresh into it or they've been doing it for a while. Things change, the threat landscape changes, the attacks change, the techniques change, the tools they use change. And what I'm wondering is, in addition to all these tools that you just described, and I'm sure there are a gazillion more, how do analysts know what to look for and how to uncover, and then how to determine the impact and perhaps even the resolution, depending on what they want to accomplish in their role? We often hear, think like a hacker, think like an attacker. How do analysts kind of get up to speed on that stuff as well, with some of the modern changes in attacks and tooling?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think there are like a number of places that you can kind of go for this. Like, this is one of the great things, is that there's a lot of kind of open security content on the internet now. But beyond that, like, for as much as like, we might laugh at the things that, people post on social media, like the InfoSec communities on some of these social media websites are actually pretty strong, and you can kind of glean insights about like what current like security experts are doing. So, in some of these cases, these are the people that you're seeing pop up in the news of having discovered the latest exploit for something, or these are people working at like Google's Project Zero. Like, these people are active and engaged in a lot of these kind of social communities. And so one way is just starting to follow them and see what they're working on. And they'll often like link to blogs that have like deep teardowns of like how they created an exploit or how they analyzed an exploit. And like, these are great resources to see how like somebody that's already an expert is doing this stuff. And you can kind of take those and look at like, here's what that looks like. Here's what it looks like to kind of the things I should be cognizant of. If I'm looking to kind of hone my own things, maybe I can try to write my own kind of exploits for things. And they have systems for if you wanted to kind of test out your ability to break into web apps, they have frameworks that you can use to kind of test known exploits and see how well you can do those things. You can get a little bit of the offensive side. By the same token, you can also do the opposite. It's I think understanding how to attack and understanding how to defend are both really important. You need to kind of have both mindsets because they're very different. And so like you can follow people that are more on the exploit side. You can follow people that are looking at kind of securing these systems and seeing what they're doing. And so like that social community is one good thing. Again, like there are also online courses that are taught from a variety of different places that might help you get a sense of where you want to start looking into defending or attacking things. And they're often free on things like Coursera, edX, sometimes Udemy. And there are a lot of those kind of courses that are available. And then like if you really kind of want to dig into kind of what's happening kind of on the the cutting edge or what's kind of coming out of the research communities, a lot of the content that security researchers are doing that often may make its way into exploits or defenses later is publicly available on the internet. And so like you can go and download these things and read them and kind of get ahead of where things might be going. And that might help you in your kind of journey to figure out, here's how I defend, here's how I attack, here are the things that might be on the horizon, here's what people are really interested in right now, and this is where I don't know a lot, maybe I should focus in more on this. And like if you're looking for those, like I came from an academic background, so there were 4 major security conferences. There was USDIC Security, ACM CCS, NDSS, and IEEE S&P, and all of those, like the publications from that, you usually can find on the publication's website, on the conference website, or the author will usually post them on their website. And those are freely available. It's by the same token, a lot of the Black Hat DEF CON talks are also made public after the fact, and you can go and look and see what other kind of security researchers or hackers or other things are doing. And those are great places to start, in addition to like blogs and things like that. So there's just like so much content online that like finding those and just kind of getting engaged in those different communities is probably a great place to kind of hone your skills a little bit.
I love it. And as you were describing those things, one thing popped into my mind that I wanted to pick your brain about, and I don't know if there's other examples, but MITRE ATT&CK. Because I view that as something perhaps an analyst can become familiar with outside of the organization or across any organization, despite what they're trying to protect, and can then, from their understanding of MITRE ATT&CK and what it provides, connect to the operations in the SOC as they're learning and move it around if they switch jobs, switch roles. Any thoughts on MITRE or other things like that can help?
Yeah, so it's a great thing. There are actually a number of kind of like security frameworks that exist out there, but MITRE ATT&CK is a really kind of, I think, widely used and kind of accepted one, which being familiar with that is really helpful in terms of giving you an understanding of how like the kind of attack lifecycle may work, and understanding that you can again start to, if you're fuzzy on how each of those points of that kind of like attack lifecycle work, you can work through those different portions of the MITRE ATT&CK framework and be like, all right, I don't really understand much about this kind of section of it. Let me go and look into seeing more content about that. But yeah, like those frameworks definitely kind of start to put together a more kind of standardized method of like reasoning about like new attacks and exploits. You can kind of start to piece where things fall in that attack framework. But I think that's really helpful in terms of contextualizing a lot of things that you're reading. Like it may all seem very different, but like when you can kind of put it as like, oh, this fits here, this is like another way to do this thing I already know about, it really does help you make sense of the security landscape a little bit better. I think that's probably also having like a good framework like that to contextualize everything is super helpful.
All right. So I think these are great perspective, but I also would like to get into the other side, which is the business side. We talk about, get proactive, get creative with your own training, your own future, and there is many tools, many resources. That's great. But once you get to work with an organization, you need that structure. I mean, different organizations work in different way. They can choose one platform versus another, and there is definitely the specific of their industry. It's not just, all right, let's get all the data possible around the world. Like, you need to focus on what is important for them and what they're trying to defend. So talking about this, I'd like for you to give us a perspective of what is happening on the business side, on the leaders for the SOC, the manager, and the whole cybersecurity side of the industry, and how at that point when you are in there, how do you SOC analysts keep your knowledge up to date? What do company do for improve the training, keep you like where you need to be on your tiptoe without having to do it, always by yourself? I'm sure companies are thinking about this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that the space is constantly evolving. And, as if you're in charge of figuring out how to secure your own organization, I think one of the challenges is identifying your attack surface. Like, what are the things that I need to focus on actually defending? And like that attack surface keeps growing. And so I think, one of those things is, understanding, do I have visibility into the different points of my attack surface? And, there are, I as much as the security landscape changed over time, a lot of companies, have some basics there. They usually have some sort of, some sort of endpoint detection and response solution, some sort of network detection and response solution. And, maybe, if you're dealing with cloud and other types of things that are exposed from your network now, you're looking at some kind of like attack surface management, tool to kind of help you show you what's exposed on the public internet, or maybe show you what kinds of things are unsecured, within your own network. And so like having things that are doing that kind of scanning and having all those different pieces. And so I think, if you're kind of tasked with, defending your network, it's identifying what that attack surface is and figuring out what the tools that like can address those attack surfaces might be. So, maybe you're going to need endpoint software on all the laptops or, phones or different things that you have, in your network, but maybe you also have IoT devices and things where you can't install that kind of stuff. So like, how do you get visibility into that? And so picking those tools that kind of address those gaps in your security posture, I think is a very important thing. And then like, once you've done that, I think, you definitely need training for your staff to be proficient in those things. And hopefully, if you're kind of adhering to some of those basics, the general skills are transferable from maybe one tool to another. The basic concepts are there, but the details are different. But I think once you're looking to kind of training and keeping that staff up to date, this is one of those cases where perhaps like sponsoring your employees to actually attend some of those industry conferences beyond just reading the stuff there on their own is maybe helpful. And that from the standpoint that like, one, they're going to get to meet other security practitioners as a group. And that might be helpful in terms of just those discussions often lead to things that you might not have thought to ask otherwise. Maybe other groups are having similar problems that you are, and just that kind of community of InfoSec people, talking with them will help your team become more aware of these things, and like maybe help establish some of those relationships where they can reach out to folks depending on things that are going on within your own organization. Be like, hey, we're seeing this type of thing. Have you guys seen this before? Can you provide some help there? But beyond that, like I think this is an opportunity where like if you have a team internally, you can have reading groups and things like that for technical publications, things like that. So like everybody's not on the hook for reading everything that comes out of one of these conferences, because I can tell you from my life in the academic space, there's too much to keep on top of everything. And so one of the really valuable things that we used to do was have reading groups where like we would have somebody tackle one topic and come and present it to everybody else. The benefit here is that you get somebody that kind of has to go in and really tackle it and become an expert and explain to everybody else. And now by nature of doing that, you have an expert on your team that can explain those things to everybody else. And now you kind of, by having a variety of these things, you get a diversity of those types of things, diversity of knowledge across the group. I also think that, this is another case where, maybe sponsoring like capture the flags or other types of things internally, is kind of a team building thing or, a learning thing, and having them, go and participate against other folks is maybe another interesting thing you can do. Having regular kind of like lunch and learns where somebody explains some topic within the SOC to, new folks, so that you can record that and have that kind of dispersed to other people coming in. But like, this forces, you to constantly be keeping on top of things and presenting these things to new folks that are coming in, so that you have onboarding resources. I think, because that's another kind of tough thing, is that, I think, as a lot of people are probably aware, like, turnover in the SOC is also high because burnout is high, because we have, probably too few people doing too many things. So being able to onboard new people quickly is probably also important, like right now, just from a practical standpoint, like you want to limit the burnout, but like you need to realize that it may still exist, and you want ways to quickly onboard new people. So having these kind of resources internally is probably incredibly useful. And then there's, other kind of like training resources where you can have people come in and give courses to your SOC. Like that's another opportunity where like you can have this be like a group activity where instead of them having to go and kind of find this on their own, they can, you could have folks like, SANS has courses, MITRE even has training courses on the attack framework if you wanted that to come in and kind of teach that to your team directly. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of opportunities for like, regular kind of content to be dispersed to your team, as long as you're making an effort to kind of have that training be a part of, the life cycle of your SOC.
Yeah, and if there's, I don't think we said it explicitly, but if there's one thing that I'm kind of sensing all the way through is there's no one most important thing ever. There's a lot. Yeah. And we're talking not just at the threat level, but from an operational level, from a technology level, from a human element level. And I think what's important is that organizations recognize that this role has a lot of things on their plate and in their mind and in their MBOs and their ability to be on top of things and have the latest knowledge is critical. And I know that's one of the main reasons that the SOC Analyst Appreciation Day was formed, was to recognize this role and the work that they do in the SOC and give a place for SOC analysts to come together and share information and engage with each other and access resources that are available to them from the community. And I mean, this is the second annual SOC Analyst Appreciation Day that Marco and I get to participate in. We're going to hold another panel this year. Last year we did the day in the life of a SOC analyst. This year we're looking at the hybrid SOC, where we leverage an internal team and an external team and probably some technology to bridge them together. And it's going to be a great conversation as part of a larger full day event that has lots of topics. So,
yeah. And I was just walking the other day, my dogs, and I was like, there should be a SOC Analyst Appreciation Day. And then I remember that there is. I mean, that's great, right? There is one. We were on it, as you said, last year, right. And we're really excited to be on this year again. And I'm scrolling down here on the page. We'll give the link in the notes and at the end of the conversation here. But it's actually in 29 days, so it's coming up, which is good. So we can think about it and don't forget, put it on the notes, because it's not too late. Just mark down the day, and there's going to be a lot of fun stuff and a lot of useful stuff, from desk decompression and reset. So thinking about the mental health, right? I'm just, again, scrolling down how you become a SOC star. That's going to be some tips from people that have been in the industry for a long time and been very successful into it. And then untraditional path into cyber, being neurodiverse in cyber. So again, very human element topic here. And the hybrid SOC, go figure, Sean, the one that we're going to be on. And then we have Paul's Security Weekly, which is going to have a special session during the event, and Untraditional Path into Cyber, and something in Spanish
sessions
as well.
in Europe. Yeah, one is in Spanish, in EMEA, and another one in APAC region as well.
So, I mean, I just lost my breath just reading through all of this. So I'm sure it's going to be great. And it was successful last year for being the first year. There was a really great feedback from the community, because it is by the community for the community. And again, I think clearly, Chaz, you pointed out the community importance few times during this conversation.
Yeah, I think, and that community is huge. I think this is I think there are efforts, within the security community now to kind of expand that community. You see kind of the evolution of the threat exchange, right? Now it's like, how do we share the threats that we're discovering so that, we're not all rediscovering the same thing and reinventing the wheel every time. And I think, one of the challenges there is that, we as a security community, we've realized that we can't go all alone, and we need this community. Now we have like a diaspora of communities, so it's like now you have to be involved in a lot of them. So I think one of the challenges going forward for the community is, how do we better curate all this knowledge that's out there, right? So we know that there are experts in a lot of different places, but if you're coming in new, it's often one of the questions you'll see asked over and over again is, how do I get plugged into the security community? How do I even get started there? What topics are really important for me to actually learn so that I can be in the SOC and be successful? And these are things where it's I think we have, general answers for this as a community, but unless you're already plugged into the community, it can be hard to find those. And I think, better curating that knowledge and kind of disseminating that to folks so that there's kind of a roadmap they can maybe take to, if they're trying to get into security, that they can follow that would be super helpful. And, I think, maybe having, fewer different, kind of communities where we're doing these exchanges is maybe helpful as well. So it's not that oh, well, this one had it and this one didn't, but I didn't know that there were 10 of them. I thought there was only one. So I think, as a security community, one of the things we can probably do better is curating this knowledge that, newcomers are having to find. Because I know when I was getting started, I was coming in and I would be working with folks, and they'd do something that seemed like magic, right? And you'd be like, well, where did that come from? Where can I go to find more information about that? And they'd be like, well, oh yeah, it's probably not written down anywhere. That's just something I've gotten from the last decade of experience they have. And you're like, that seems like that would be a useful thing for us to, have written down and shared, and those kind of insights better captured. And so I think there's opportunity for the community for especially with the kind of SOC appreciation day, where we could maybe come together and share some of these things so that people can get better plugged into the community.
You know what is a good point about that is the fact that this is already filtered information, right? I'm thinking there is so much out there, and sometimes too much. It is too much. It's overwhelming. It's so maybe to put together this kind of event where you do select the specific topic, the specific guest, I think people can get a little bit more, more from it without scrambling so much.
It's much more direct.
Yes.
and pointed. And I can say I'm honored to be part of this event, and I'm thrilled to have had this conversation with you, Chaz. And I think it's a great, it's not a kickoff for the event we're doing here, but I think it's a great way to kind of let people know that it's taking place. And these are the types of conversations that are being held that day, October 19th, SOCAnalystday.com. Check the notes for links and other resources here on ITSPmagazine. And by all means, stay tuned for our session on the hybrid SOC that day as well. So thanks, Chaz. Thanks, Marco. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of our on-location conversation. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. you can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.